we are human, we are animals, we crave the ability to be we. I know it's called me undies. We undies might have sounded differently, right?
Is it a disco now?
Yeah, it's an after party, so it's now we go with the flash.
My goal in life is to be a laptop sticker.
Me too.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.
It's a great honor, Mr. Jaffe. It's always nice to be with you.
I'm so happy to be with you. I'm honored.
Thanks for doing this, too. It's a real service to the community.
Thank you for doing this, Joseph, for doing CoronaTV in general. And it's your gift to the universe, and it's appreciated.
Very human, and I like that.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're insane!
Hello, everybody. I am certifiably insane. It is good to be with you on this Tuesday, June 2nd. I am thrilled because I get to meet the one and only Ron Tite. And, you know, the story as it goes with Ron is every single time I talk to someone, they go, well, you must know Ron Tite. And I go, I don't know Ron Tite. Who is Ron Tite? And they're like, Ron Tite? Ron Tite he's the man. He is the pinnacle. You know, when we talk about the speaker, in the dictionary, it says, see Ron Tite. And, you know, in doing a little bit of investigating and seeing some of the things he writes about and speaks about, it's just pretty awesome. And so he'll be on the show in about 10 minutes. But before I do, I want to, obviously you can see it's not necessarily a new look, but what you see in the background is a black background. I'm wearing a black t-shirt. You know, today I posted on Instagram just nothing but a black background. And I just wanted to mention something as well. In fact, you know, let me show it to you. I did a little bit of a screencast of what my Instagram feed looks like. So I believe the hashtag that I used was Blackout Tuesday, but I also just wanted to mention something to anyone who's actually doing this today or wants to do this today, who wants to show their solidarity. Don't use the hashtag Black Lives Matter. There's actually been a couple of articles, and this is all the education I'm getting from my daughter at the moment, my freshman college age daughter, because what it's done is it's actually flooded the whole feed. So, you know, it's a bit of a tongue twister, I know. But so there's a lot of good happening. And the fact that right now, if you look at your Instagram feed as you scroll, that's what you should be seeing. But at the same time, I think it is important and incumbent upon people that have a voice, that have a platform, that understand social media, to actually be educating that we shouldn't be using that hashtag Black Lives Matter, because people are actually trying to use it to communicate. Now, here is one website that you might want to think about using or visiting. And again, this comes to me through my daughter, blacklivesmatter.carrd.co, a bunch of ways that you can get involved, that you can educate yourself, that you can donate, that you can contribute in your own particular way, because everything counts and everything matters and everyone matters. And that's, you know, what I discussed in the soliloquy yesterday. So, you know, just to kind of make things a little bit lighthearted for a moment, today is National Leave the Office Early Day. So how's that working out for you guys? Looks like the memo actually was sent out in March, not June, but I just thought that was kind of funny. So I wanted to share that with you. And speaking of sharing, as always, I don't know if you've been listening to me. If so, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. But those of you that are liking all of these posts and all of these shows and commenting, please comment below. Or, you know, it's not just an opportunity to get on the show, but I get to see who you are and acknowledge you. And it's all that engagement, the sharing, the subscribes, the comments, the likes. I feel dirty even asking for them, because like when I've watched all these YouTubers over the years saying all of this stuff, I'm like, God, stop it, stop shilling, stop pandering. but it really actually is important, and I can actually see the difference in terms of momentum and growth. So I just want to thank you for that. I want to thank. This is the opposite of a completely blacked out background, but it is a multicolored background, and I hope over the weeks and months and years to come, a multicultural one as well. These are all my wonderful guests, and today, of course, I get to welcome Ron Tite to join the tapestry, the mosaic, the collage, the montage of bright minds and voices, and very generous sharers, because I know for a fact that I've become so much smarter myself just listening to all of my wonderful guests. So let's do birthdays very briefly to all my only 5 Facebook friends, 5 out of 5,000 Facebook friends, but Erwin Janssen in Belgium is one of them, and my friend Mandy Lewitton, who you see there, is celebrating her birthday, and it looks like we might actually have a drink this weekend in real life, which should be awesome and petrifying and exhilarating. And then, of course, to all of my LinkedIn friends, you are no less important to me, I can assure you and guarantee you, even though I don't know who most of you are, but that's okay too. I'm not going to discuss this today in the soliloquy, but there's a lot of, I don't even know if Ron has a point of view on this, maybe we'll ask him later, but there are a lot of people that are seriously thinking about leaving Facebook because of Mark Zuckerberg's stance. You know, unlike the Twitter response to some of the Trump tweets or some of the misinformation going out there, and the response and the cozying up, if you will, you know, I just think it's really interesting because I don't know what to do myself. What do? I kind of like, I can't leave you, but I want to leave you. It is a real conundrum, and it looks like maybe LinkedIn might become the #1 social network if people do decide to leave Facebook en masse. The other point that I just want to mention very briefly is, yet again, you know, when we think a social network will live forever, ABC, NBC, you know, CBS, then it was MySpace and MySpace. Remember MySpace and Yahoo and AOL and MSN. No one lives forever. No civilization, no dynasty, no empire, no corporation, and no country, and certainly not no social network. So just something to think about. Well, today's seated soliloquy is about planning, and it is inspired by my guest, Mr. Ron Tite. You know, there are many business leaders, management legends, motivational gurus, and strategic powerhouses that teach us about the importance of contingency or scenario planning. What a mouthful. But none as profound and poignant as Mike Tyson, who is credited with the following pearl of wisdom. Everyone have a plan until they get punched in the face. Yes, this is the same Mike Tyson that eats ears as snacks, and the same Mike Tyson who mentioned upon retirement he would fade into oblivion, and to date no one has found him or seen him in La Paz. I love his quote for so many reasons. For starters, it talks about how truly fragile, vulnerable, and exposed we are. Nothing in this world is certain. We might believe we are safe and secure, but in reality, it is just an illusion. In the case of a boxing metaphor, it rings even more true because a boxer knows he's going to get punched in the face. It's not a sucker punch. It's the exact opposite. You know it's coming, and when it comes, everything changes. The survival instinct kicks in when the legs begin to wobble. The original plan gets tossed out the window, and a new master plan is formed. Don't get punched in the face again. Tyson's analogy is not just prophetic. It's super relevant for the times we're living in right now. We haven't just been punched in the face. We've been punched in the gut, and quite frankly, below the belt as well. And so, in the spirit of fight, flight, or freeze, I'm assuming you're not a fan of freeze or flight. So, now it's time to pick ourselves off the canvas and fight back. And at the back of our minds, prepare ourselves for the next punch to the face, because it's coming. And most likely, sooner than we think. And now it's time to welcome my guest, someone who knows a lot about the 5 Ds of dodge, duck, dive, dip, and dodge. Well, that would be Ron Tite. He's an entrepreneur. He's a global keynote speaker. He's an author. He's a CEO, and he's a stand-up comedian, or at least he knows something or two about stand-up. When he isn't keynoting around the world, he serves clients like Walmart and Microsoft through his agency, Church+State. Their podcast, The Coup, was named Outstanding Business Series by the Canadian Podcast Awards and was a finalist at the New York Awards. Ron's second book, Think, Do, Say, How to Seize Attention and Build Trust in a Busy, Busy World, has been lauded across the board. Ron, welcome to the show.
Oh, so you're Joseph. You're Joseph.
Wait, you're Ron? Oh my God.
Finally,
exactly.
we get to meet. This has gone on way too long.
And now the greatest anticlimax of all time, when I can only be a letdown, right? I'm sure. I feel the opposite for you, by the way.
Not at all. It was the first time I actually heard your voice was on the Beancast. I think we've both done the Beancast, and I was listening to one, and I was like, "Oh, he's South African!" Like I didn't even know that, you know. So this is just lovely to finally meet you.
And it's my pleasure. You know, I think maybe Mitch Joel was the first person who mentioned your name. And he was shocked and horrified when I said, I've never met him before. But I think, was it Mitch who made the introduction? No, it was Carla.
It was Carla. But Mitch is one of my best friends. And we have a daily text, hourly text with one another, to the point that Mitch and Scott Stratton. And at one point, my wife said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, I'm just texting Scott and Mitch. And she's like, "That's what you're always doing."
No, you were like, it's Jake from State Farm.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
So now I found out a couple of things about you when we were talking earlier. First and foremost, you have, did you say a newborn?
Yeah, we have 2 kids. We have a 2-year-old, and we have a newborn. So the pandemic was declared. This is what my pandemic has been. The pandemic was declared on Wednesday, March 11th. And like you, probably, I had, basically 8 months of speaking engagements gone the next afternoon. And then that night we went to the hospital and we welcomed our second son, Benny, to the world on Friday, March 13th, Friday the 13th.
Wow.
So, people, are like, man, what's it like with a 2-year-old and a newborn in a lockdown? And the only response is like, it's not ideal. Everyone's got their own stuff, and this is not ideal, but we're making it work.
You kind of delivered that like Jerry Seinfeld would have, I feel. Well, it's not ideal.
It's not ideal. Yeah, that would be a Seinfeldian way to deliver that. Yeah, you're right.
So would it be true to say that of all the people in the world and all the public speakers, no one is more excited to travel again and travel the world than you?
Oh, don't you know it? Don't you know it? Well, also, part of it is this, like, I quite like that life. I had operationalized it in a very enjoyable and successful way. And people will say like, you just must hate the travel part. Like, no, I didn't mind it. I got to work a lot. I did some of my best writing on planes, and it was in a flow, and I just made it work between home and the agency and everything. So, it's certainly, I look forward to getting back on a plane. Not many people say that, but I do look forward to getting back on a plane.
I love traveling. I call it collecting runs. So what I love to do is go for runs in the different local markets. So I remember running in Buenos Aires, running through this ecological preserve, and I was actually, and it was so weird because I think I was listening to Seth Godin on a podcast mentioning my name, or someone who was talking to him mentioned my name. Yeah. And it was just so weirdly meta. And I always remember where I was when I heard a podcast. it's been fantastic for me, and I don't take it for granted. I also love planes. I mean, I love being on a plane, and I love, obviously, first world problems. I love being in business class or first class. Don't quite like the coach part, but
no. Well, I mean, some people, they're obsessed with the details of it. And in terms of the points, and Mitch is very good. Mitch is very knowledgeable with the entire, flying experience. Whereas I'm way more lackadaisical. I'm just more like, I get it thing. That's how I coped with it. Was I didn't put too much thought into it. I showed up, I sat down, I landed, I got back on the next day.
So one of the weirdest things that's happened, and it's actually probably not weird at all, is I think it was one of my first guests on the show that said, from a behavioral standpoint and a routine standpoint, if you do anything or don't do anything for 30 days, it becomes the new norm and the new routine. And I've been very honest to people. Like, I have zero desire, and I mean zero desire, to set foot in another restaurant again. I just don't. The concept of it is foreign to me. I don't even want to. And I actually don't want to fly. I don't want to travel. I don't want to do anything. And I've almost cocooned myself, in my studio, in the global headquarters of CoronaTV, aka my home office. And I'm scared. I'm also scared. It's not like I'm comfortable and I love this so much. I just don't want to venture out.
Yeah, it's weird because we're in this state of how much do I invest in the thing, right? And so I'm sitting here. The other thing that happened to us was I had to halt a reno. So our house was under a massive renovation. And so I had to halt that at the beginning of all this. So I'm on the third floor, which has not been completed yet. And I just took a room. And so now I'm in the zone of I don't know, how much do I put into this space? Is this a 2-year, 3-year plan? Because if it is, then maybe we need to dial this up a little bit more. Or is this something? Are we going to be going back to the office? Can I build it there? I don't know. So that's what I'm gonna. I think we're just gonna listen to all the health professionals out there and see what we do.
I was just getting a full look at Tite HQ there at THQ. So I love what you've done with the place.
I did. I had to put this up, right? Because this is just an empty room that hasn't been finished yet.
It could have been very contrasting, right? Black and white. If only people didn't see issues as black and white. but the rich tapestry of colors in your background.
Yes, exactly.
So another thing is we share a Mike Lipkin in common. And Mike was on the show. It was one of my very, very favorite interviews, just because, I don't know, just the chemistry was amazing. And then I found out in talking to you that you do an impression of Mike Lipkin. Well, and Mike, I want to hear it.
Well, it's tricky because, one, the South African accent, as you probably don't know, to non-South Africans, is a very difficult accent to do. And then to do an impression of somebody can be people can think we're making fun of them, when in fact I absolutely love Mike Lipkin. And he's such a great speaker. He's such a wonderful human being. He's such a great pro. He's given me a lot of great advice over the years. But I remember the first couple of times that I saw him, I started hosting a lot, and that because I went from comedy into speaking, but I hosted for a lot in the middle. And so I was hosting and Mike was the keynote, and then I'd come back and then I'd do a comedy set at nighttime based on what I heard in the day. And so I would sit through. And so the first few times I sat through Mike taking notes, and then I would do Mike in the evening part. And Mike has his Lipkinisms. And so I remember, he will, if you call Mike and leave a voicemail, his voicemail is him leaving you a Lipkinism. So I called him and I got, "Hi, it's Mike Lipkin. Remember, if not you, who? If not now, when?" And I got the message and I said, "Mike, it's Ron. Remember, foosball is just a combination of foosball is just a combination of soccer and shish kebabs. Click. And which is an old Mitch Hedberg line. And then he called me back and left me other way. Ron, it's Mike. Fuck off. Click. He is the most wonderful man ever. Mitch does a great Mike too, because when Mike became a grandfather, and I'm friends with Mike's son as well. And we were talking. If you talk to Mike, and I call him like, "Hey, Grandpa," I just called to say, congratulations on becoming a grandfather. And it was like he immediately goes into Mike Lipkin, professional speaker, right? Like, oh, Ron, it's amazing. They look up at you with the eyes, with all the promise of the world waiting for you. It's the grandfather. I think Mitch did that once.
Well, Mitch, I think is watching, and I don't know in reference to him saying he's very knowledgeable. We know he's very knowledgeable, and certainly
Mitch is here. Oh, I wasn't looking. Sorry.
And Bob said the Beancast rules. I can only imagine Dr. Dean Allen when he said that's every day in Cape Town. He must be talking about a blackout or black background, because we've had South Africa has rolling power failures. So I just want to say hello to a few of the regulars like Joey and Bob. And Mitch agrees that he does a very a great Mike Lipkin impersonation.
Yeah, he does.
I'm sounding like Russell Crowe doing Mike Lipkin, doing Joseph Jaffe, doing Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon 2.
Yeah.
Which by the way, growing up in South Africa and seeing Lethal Weapon 2, it was so cringeworthy. We were so embarrassed. It was awful and yet exhilarating that Mel Gibson had acknowledged us. But it wasn't him. He wasn't the villain. He was, I don't know what his character was, but it was.
Do you remember the line spoken by the South African character that people would repeat?
Which one was it?
Diplomatic immunity.
Oh yeah, diplomatic immunity. Yeah. Good one. I like that. I've got to go back and, in fact, that might have to find its way into the opening. I feel right now the entire conversation of ours could be in the opening credits now.
Yeah, seriously.
Every time I see a blooper, every time I go, excellent. Cut, edit, replace.
Right.
Goodbye, Scott Monty. Goodbye, Mitchell. Hello, Ron Tite. Now, so we'll segue into some work stuff in a moment, but the stand-up comedy stuff is interesting to me. I mean, and that's why I think, talking about impersonations, etc. I told, the monologue, the little soliloquy was about planning, but it was, when I show that Mike Tyson quote in many of my presentations, it's also next to this idea that we are living in the age of improv. When we have our set and we've rehearsed it and we're gonna kill and we practice it on people and we stand up in front of the crowd and we just bomb and the crowd turns on us. What are we gonna do, right? Are we gonna curl up into that embryo position and cry, or are we gonna fight back? And so I'm always curious when I'm talking to someone who actually understands stand up, not because I just get it viscerally and superficially. I would love for you to talk a little bit about that connection and the importance of it.
Yeah, there's so many great skills there. And you're right that is the hallmark of a great stand-up. And I think what a lot of stand-ups love about stand-up when you compare it to other forms of comedy. So improv is just all made up. It's completely made up. And there's certainly brilliance in that. And then on the other side is sketch comedy, which is like Saturday Night Live kind of stuff. And sketch comedy is completely scripted. Now, what's great about stand-up is you go in with a plan. You have your bits, and you typically before a set, you're like, oh, it's a 20-minute setting of this bit, this bit, this bit. But there's a rule in stand-up which you should never ignore the reality of the room. And if something happens in the room, if someone yells out, "You suck," well, then there's another clip for your opening. "You suck." If somebody says that, then you have to address it. Everybody heard it. And you're now suddenly taken off on a tangent. You're taken off your script, and you're now engaged with something and you have no idea how it's going to go. And the great comedian, finds success and not only finds humor and success in that moment, but that moment propels them to create something new, which then they bring back into the set for the next time. So it's not just about having that moment and never touching it again, but it's like, wow, I found something there, and I'm going to now start to incorporate some aspects of that bit or that insight into other material. And just getting a very subtle vibe of the room. You know what's working, what's not working. You know if you can spend more time. You know if you need to cock an eyebrow. You know if you need to change your physicality. All that stuff is what we do in business, and certainly what we do as speakers, but what we do in business. The other part that I think is so great is that heckler moment. So allow me to just build this metaphor for you. In stand-up, there are two types of hecklers. There's the active heckler and the passive heckler. Now, the active heckler is the person who says they hear what you're saying, they completely understand it, and they voice their opinion. They heard the joke, they say you suck. That's an active heckler. In business, we also have active hecklers. We're in meetings. We have some, we do a presentation and someone hears it, they disagree with it, and they go, I'm not buying those numbers for Q4 in your forecast. Now, what's great about the active heckler is you know precisely what they think, and you can engage with them on that level. What don't you like about the Q4 numbers? Funny, because here's my math, and then I'll add it up. The other type of heckler in comedy is the passive heckler, a way more dangerous heckler, because the passive heckler doesn't even know you're on stage. They're looking at their phone, they're talking to their friend, they're completely distracted by something. They don't even know you're there. So not only do they not think you're funny, it's that they haven't heard it, they don't understand it, nothing. They don't even know that you're there. And they're really, really dangerous, because more passive hecklers occur in a room. Obviously, the less comprehension, the less laughter you're going to get. And that apathy can spread really quickly. In business, the passive heckler is the same thing. They're really dangerous. They're the person who say nothing in a meeting, but who kill your idea in the hallway. That person's really, really dangerous. And in both situations, what you need to do is you need to proactively engage with the person and go, hey, Frank, I haven't heard from you in a little while. What do you think of the proposal? You need Frank to go on the record with what Frank thinks. And in a comedy club, you need the active heckler. You need to walk up to the active heckler. And I would do that, where I would literally just walk up. And sometimes all you need to do is stand beside the person, and they think, oh, I've been found out. What we call that in stand-up, when you go and you start to speak to somebody directly, is called spritzing. And you spritz with the room to just go from here, and you just pick up on things to see what you can incorporate into your act. And I think we need to spritz as business professionals as well.
I was thinking as you were talking, I was just going to kind of pick up my phone and just look at him, right. And I
would come really close to the camera.
And then I would say, I've been found out, Frank. But I didn't want to do it. Also, I didn't want to do it even, because I think what you said was just so fantastic and so profound and valuable. And so thank you for that. There were many things going on in my mind. I think the first one was the parallel with respect to this idea of customer service and engagement, right? Which is we want people to love us. I often say when people hate us and say you suck, they're just saying we love you. We just want you to work a little bit harder to earn that love. But it is, again, apathy and indifference. But you have an agency, and I think Mitch had an agency. We know how dangerous the silent but violent client is. And I think that was a brilliant technique as well. And I was thinking, Ron, how do you read the room, and how do you find the active and the passive hecklers in a virtual webinar, Zoom-enabled world? Is it even possible?
It is, because you can, if you ask a question in a live event, you can see where the engaged people are. And so what I've been doing is you give people the time, instead of just opening it up and saying who's got questions, or I'm going to just go to somebody, you say, here's what I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you this question. You've got 2 minutes, and I want you to write down your top 3 answers. go. And be warned that when we come back, I'm just going to start picking people and asking you to come off mute. So you're not coming at them out of the blue where they haven't had a chance to think about it. You're getting them to commit to something on page. And so then what you say is not, do you have questions? What you say is, what did you write down? And if they go, oh, well, I just had this weird thing, I don't know. And then you go, tell me about the weird thing. And they go, I just wrote tomato. And you're like, ah, right, tomato, because this idea isn't ripe yet, right? Or whatever. So you forced yourself into a spritzing environment, but you do it in a way that's not, that respects that, not everybody can think on their feet like that.
And so what about in this environment now where we don't have the live crowd? How do we, besides the usual jokes? I mean, I've used the joke about I'm not wearing pants right now, and I'm really not. But anyway, but then how do you you make a joke and there's just crickets, right? You can't hear people laughing, smiling, rolling their eyes in the background. How do you keep that energy up as a speaker, recognizing that you're like basically talking to a wall?
The mindset that I got into was, what do the news anchors do? Like news anchors who have to deliver, profound, and I mean, news anchors with integrity, profound, important information, and how do they gather up the energy and the focus to do it in a way? And I think you need to perform, right? This is what we do. And you perform knowing what the audience is going through, and you perform at a level that you think the audience wants to receive it. So if it's a really poignant moment and you need these power pauses, and in your heart of hearts that in person, this is what people do, then I think you need to deliver it this way here too. And it's more conscious because we're not picking up on those millisecond, vibes that we're getting from people. But it is just as important. The other thing that I think is important is I love when I'm speaking live, I love to be on IMAG. And, it is a bit disconcerting when you look out into the audience and everybody is looking like this, right? They're looking at the screen on the side. What I love about it is it actually allows you as a speaker to perform it smaller, what we would call smaller, where you can be more subtle. And so if I cock an eyebrow, you're going to see it. If I'm in a room of 500 people with no IMAG, then you're probably not going to see that. So that's why I have to be more animated when I'm on stage. But in an IMAG environment, you can be way more subtle. And so that's, I think, I've seen some people, I love that people are trying a million different things. I absolutely love it. And there's no right answer. But I think I've focused on scaling it back and making it more intimate and more conscious with my actions and my tone.
Well, I'll say just this final point, and then I want to talk. There's so many meaty things that I want to that you've spoken about and you've written about on disruption, which is common theme for me as well. And we'll get there in a second. But the one thing I wanted to mention is it's been very interesting. I'm sure you'd agree, looking at all of these talk show hosts that have had to now perform late night or in their homes. And so two little reflections on my part. One is Bill Maher is the only one that's actually gone to a laugh track, and he shows all these, images of like audiences that's still in black and white from 50 years ago. But the second part that's interesting about it is I actually feel more comfortable and more relaxed in that environment because I feel there's such an awkwardness about the silence. When the emperor has no clothes, you realize without all the bells and whistles, these guys and gals are not as polished and as professional as you think. It's just that they're around a context that supports them and props them up. So it is the opposite of being unplugged in a way.
Yeah, it is completely different, and you have to explore a different skill set. I mean, if you buy a Tesla, you can't expect to now go back to the same gas station that you've had all along. Like that doesn't work. If you commit to doing this thing, then that comes with a whole suite of other complementary reactions to it. And I think our first approach is to just say, well, how do I take what I do on stage and do it, like this? That's natural. But then I think as we do it more and test more, we start to find like, oh, I can't put the gas in. It doesn't work. I signed up for an electric car. I need to go to a completely different space with a completely different tool that's available.
Now, Ron is going to join us in our Zoom after show room afterwards, and that was actually inspired by Bill Maher, his whole YouTube after show. He may or may not be impersonating me at the end, but hopefully he'll impersonate Mitch, or if Mitch comes to it, maybe Mitch will impersonate Mike, or if Mike comes to it, he can basically tell both of you to screw off. So, and FYI, the F-bomb count just went up by 1. I was doing so well until Ted Rubin was on the show yesterday, and I think he took me from 1 to 6. Now we're at 7, and I don't care anymore. We're in quarantine. So Ron, just continue to be yourself, my friend.
Oh, okay, great. The more to come.
He's about to swear now. So now I want to segue to your agency, Church and State, which I think is very apropos when we talk about black and white and all these extremes. There are a couple of stories that are interesting here. One is you've rebranded your agency. And 2 is you have an agency, which is well done in these tough times. But I'd love to, I always also love, especially when I'm talking to founders, understanding the name, what's in a name. There's a lot in a name. So talk a little bit about the journey to Church and State and why the name Church and State.
Yeah. So I was executive creative director at Havas, which is at Havas Toronto. And I, like many people before me, it said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so I decided to go it on my own. I wanted more control over my destiny. I wanted more control over the things I worked on. They were amazing people and wonderful environment. I just wanted some freedom. And so the first thing I did was I said, okay, I don't care what it's called. I really don't care what it's called. So it's called the Tite Group. And it's me and it's the Tite Group. And I give it 6 months. And if it doesn't fly, it doesn't fly. It's all good. And the only thing I had as a direction for what the agency would do was that I knew that the world was becoming cluttered and that the dynamic between media companies and agencies and advertisers were always very different. There was the agency personnel, and there were the NBCs and the Wall Street Journals, completely dependent on one another to coexist. But never did those worlds cross over. And there was editorial credibility, and it was called the separation of church and state from the publisher side. So the only thing I had going in was that I wrote a line, and it was that brands need to become media properties, and media properties need to become brands. And I just said, I don't even know what that line means. I wrote it, and I don't even know what that line means. I'm just going to figure that out. And I'm going to get people in who are going to help me figure it out. And I'm only going to take projects that help me figure that out. And I'm going to do that. And so I did that and just organically grew from just me behind a desk with 0 clients. And we got to the point where we hit a certain level where 2 things became clear. One, we knew what we did really, really well. We had a really specific perspective on the advertising world, and it was the unification of church and state. And secondly, that if this was going to scale, we had to take Tite out of it. I mean, not out of the agency, but we had to take my name off the door. And I always thought that it had to line up between, Ron Tite's the guy on stage and the Tite agency. And my friend Neil Pesrisha, who you may know, Neil's a great speaker, wrote the Book of Awesome. Neil didn't know me from agency world, he knew me from speaking world. And we were going somewhere, and Neil, I said, well, just come by the office. So he came by the office, and he walks in. He's like, oh, it's a thing. There are people here. And because at that point, I think we were 20 people. And I said, yeah, what did you think? He's like, oh, well, the Tite Group, like most speakers, I thought it was just you in your basement. he said, you're doing yourself a disservice, because his reaction was, it's probably a one-person agency because it was my name. So I was like, oh, that's an interesting perspective. We're going to take my name off the door. And so we kind of went down this road of like, how do you do something that is not completely functional, like cheap ads or whatever, but how do you do something that is strategically relevant to what you do? And my friend Bram Warshawski, we were chatting, and I said something about the notion of church and state, and he said that'd make a great agency name. And 2 years later, I was like, we're gonna use that name. And then the day that it was really funny, because the day the press release went out, the Tite Group is now church and state. I see like Bram had called me, and I just see it's Bram on the phone, and I answered by going, "What took you so long?" You know, like he knew. He's like, he took my name, he used my name. So that's how we got there.
There are a whole bunch of things you said in that story which I find very meaty. One is this idea of you wrote something and it sounded profound and you weren't quite sure what it meant, and then you're like, yeah, we'll figure it out as we go along. But there's something beautiful about it, because, and it's almost serendipitous too. It's just, which is maybe the journey will be more pleasurable than that aha moment, because it will evolve, right? Just like the concept of church and state, and everybody looking at something and going, well, this is the way things have always worked. And to which you say, but why? Well, aren't there some interesting combinations where we can bring them together? So I love the fact that there's nothing finite and definitive. It just seems to be very much organic and alive and evolving. And isn't that the spirit of agility, and going back to the idea of everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, which is sometimes having too much of a plan and being too sure about yourself is a surefire recipe for disaster.
Yeah, you're right about the line, right? And I think we're in a zone now where, you know, people are quoting themselves on Instagram and stuff. And, the first reaction would have been like, you know, media companies, brands have to be media companies, and media companies have to be brands. And I would have put it on Instagram and, you know, at Ron Tite and then be done with it. But the reality was I knew what it meant philosophically, but I didn't know what it meant to pitch that and to operationalize that and to like, how do I apply that? And so for 8 months was just me. And all I did was work on the strategy of like, how would I pitch this? Like, what does this look like if I was to take on an assignment? And then slowly but surely, and what's interesting, how I knew Mike Lipkin, but I met his son, Anthony, because he was launching with his partners this thing called DX3. And I heard about it and I said, I don't know what you're doing, but I like what you're doing. I want to help out. And I'm not pitching you. I don't want money for this. And then I joined their advisory board. And that is just like, sometimes you just got to go, this is interesting. I want to figure it out.
So you know, Jay has just said, looks like the past couple of months are showing agencies that they'll need to pivot like crazy. And I want to respond to that, but first of all, I think we both want to say hello to Carla.
Hello, Carla.
Hello, Carla. So you talk about the power of not just the pivot, but reading the room and open to the room. Carla recommended you. One of the new things I'm starting on CoronaTV is to ask my guest at the end to recommend, and if they're gracious enough to make an introduction to that person, recommend a guest to keep the whole thing moving. And the beauty of that idea, so Carla really, this began in a way with Carla, is that if I trusted Carla to bring you onto the show without even thinking, well, of course I would have, because I knew of you, and I trust you and I respect you because I brought you onto the show, then I don't even need to vet the person that you're recommending, because it's your social currency and it's all I need as well to keep this connection. So I want you to write down 3 people on a piece of paper. I'm going to give you 2 minutes and I'm going to come to you afterwards. But here's actually what I wanted to say to you with respect to what Jay has said, which is everybody's talking about the death of the agency, and agencies are in such trouble. And I think looking at you, and you got to bring up someone like Gary Vaynerchuk as well. These are almost the accidental agency CEOs. They didn't begin that way, but they began with a message. They began with the thought leadership, right? They began with the ability, and here's your book, Think, Do, Say, which is your second book. And I think the ability to create an agency that can be a voice or a mouthpiece for the founder without making it about the founder as much as, for example, the Tite Group is now church and state. Maybe there is hope for the agency, and it goes back to David Ogilvy, Bill Bernbach. We need the personalities back. We need those figureheads. We need those visionary, inspirational leaders. We need you, Ron.
Well, was it Jaya who had the comment about
JS? I'll put it back on.
Oh, JS. Sorry. So JS. Yes. So JS. I totally agree with you. And what we need is people. I've called it out. I think programmatic is the biggest, the most fraudulent behavior that has ever existed in advertising. I think that the joke I made is like, craft services we're making our own sandwich, or creative departments are making their own craft sandwiches for craft services, while millions are being blown away, like just gone. Money is gone through programmatic and fraud, and that we've lost a soul in advertising and in marketing and in sales, where we're just going for the pitch slap. We're just pitching people wherever the heck we can pitch them. And we've lost our soul of knowing when that's effective and when that's not effective, and when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. And there was a guest, and it kills me that I have to go back and listen, but it was a guest on Ian Altman, who would be a great guest. Ian Altman of Same Side Selling, wonderful guy. And there was a guest on his podcast, and I can't remember who it was, but this guest said, digital was never supposed to be about scale. It was supposed to be about customization. And that was that statement alone. That is everything that is wrong with the current state of sales and marketing and advertising, is that we made digital about scale, where we could just blast everybody and forget about the innocent bystanders. It was supposed to be about customization. I mean, I was an old creative guy, cranking out TV spots and out of home and print ads. And the digital folks were like, just you wait, the digital advertising will get to only the people that want to see that message. Well, where did that go? Because I'd love to experience some of that. And so we need to get our soul back. And I think if it's personalities that help us do it, then great. I think we are slightly coming back. We had somebody reached out and said, we're doing a financial roll-up of agencies. And I said, what's the strategic roll-up? And they were like, it doesn't matter. We're not selecting any particular agency. We're just saying whoever wants to join us, and we're just going to financially roll it all up. And I'm like, well, where's the soul? Who wants to do that? And who says that that's a compelling product that somebody wants to buy? All you're going to do is just cut costs on the back end and get some financial efficiencies. What type of business is that? So yeah, I'm pretty passionate about it, and I think it makes business way more enjoyable when we have a soul.
And of course, everything happens in cycles, and so here we see the next wave of independents or boutiques or creative shops or strategy shops growing, and it used to be right. As Jay Scheidt once said, which was the inspiration behind my book, Built to Suck. Let's see how big we get before we suck, before we go bad. But I think this time something's going to happen, which is if you're building an agency in order to sell it to a holding company, guess what? There may not be holding companies left. So you're going to have to you're going to have to think about a different exit strategy, or just do it because you love it.
Yeah. You know what I find really interesting with in Canada, anyhow, what we seem to have happened is the holdcos go out and they buy a boutique agency, but then they take the leadership of the boutique agency and put them into the big agency. So, when WPP bought John Street, they took the CEO of John Street, Arthur Fleischen, and moved him into a CEO role at Ogilvy. And when TBW went out and got Juniper Park, they took Jill Nicolation and made her the CEO of Juniper Park TBWA. And so, I think that it's kind of like when the big breweries buy craft beer, they let the craft beer remain a craft beer. They do get those efficiencies and scale, but you let them stay nimble and stay the boutique that you bought.
So I wanted to ask you one question, which I just loved. And I think maybe what we'll do is we'll take that to the Zoom after show. But it was all about how you've drawn this analogy with respect to disruption by kind of comparing it and drawing the analogy of a coup d'etat. And I just want to hear more about that. And if you guys want to hear more about that, and of course, hear Ron do impressions of Mitch, come over to the Zoom room. I'll put up that URL. It's bit.ly/CoronaTV after show. But Ron, we're going to do a couple things just before we end. Sure. First of all, I just want to thank you again, and don't be a stranger now that we have finally met. You might say I don't want to meet him again, but hopefully, we can have a braai together with Mike and have some boerewors and do some very, very bad South African impersonations from Lethal Weapon 2, Diplomatic Immunity. Yeah. But there are a couple of things that I always like to ask my guests, and a few new things as well. So the first is, going back to what you wrote down on that piece of paper when you were on your phone and rolling your eyes. If you could come up with a guest or a couple of guests for the show, and if you'd be so kind as to make an introduction, that would be awesome. And then, of course, you get a mention when they come on the show. So did anyone come to mind? Well, I think you said Ian Altman.
Ian Altman would be wonderful. Same Side Selling. He'd be fantastic. He's very fun. Allison Levine. Do you know Allison Levine? No,
but I'm hoping she's a she.
It is a she. It is a she.
We had an all-white male review this week, so I'm trying to take some steps. But
yes. So yeah, Allison Levine would be fantastic. Joey Coleman would be a great.
I met Joey. I met Joey. He's fantastic. Is he Canadian too? Is Joey Canadian?
No, Joey is from Denver, which is really the Canada of
Okay, there you go. That was a softball. Okay, yes to all. Please come on the show. Ron, before we just talk about how people can find you, we get serious for a moment right at the end, and I thoroughly enjoyed the levity and the brain food as well, food for the soul and food for the brain as well. But there are people at home right now. There are people that have lost their jobs. There are people that are that are struggling. What advice, besides your little mini masterclass you've given, would you give to people in terms of figuring out how they can pivot and bounce back and come back stronger than ever before?
Well, the first thing you need to do is do whatever you need to do so the car doesn't crash. That's the first thing, and so if it means that you need to get a part-time job, if it means you got to get whatever you need to do to just ensure that everybody is going to be healthy and safe. So that's the first thing. The second thing, though, is if you've got a little bit of runway, is to really identify the problems that can be solved. And from a brand standpoint, typically it's like, okay, if I've got some runway, the first thing I can do is, if I have some excess assembly line time, can I use some of that to pivot into making supplies, making masks and making hand sanitizer and things like that? So what can I do in my job to quickly repurpose what I do for the greater good? The second thing is, if I can't do that, then can I be sharing critical information that helps people stay safe? We just did a massive campaign on stopping the spread of misinformation around COVID-19. So we need to check first and share after. We need to check where things come from before we share them with everybody. And then once we've done that, then we can really look to what problem exists in our industry that didn't exist before, and how can we best solve that problem for people? And worry about the money later. The how it all pays for itself is going to work itself out. but just go to where the problems are and pitch in to help solve those problems. And it's amazing what opportunities will come from that.
I think maybe think, do, say is a good 1, 2, 3 punch for preventing us from spreading misinformation as well. But that is your second book. I've heard tremendous things about the book. People absolutely love it. They love you. And for people that want to find out more about Ron Tite, who will be reading The Virtual Room and picking on you, even though you won't know that he's picking on you, you can go to rontite.com or find out more about Church and State at church+state.co. Oops, I took you off there for a second. I didn't mean to. I will leave you with this thought, which is Canadians are taking over the world, and there's nothing we Americans can do about it. So it's all South Africans. It's too bad.
One back bacon sandwich at a time. We're coming for you.
So, you know, bear that in mind as your legs wobble, as you hit the canvas and realize you've been punched in the face, my American friends. Ron, thank you for coming in, and we'll see you shortly in the Zoom room.
Thanks for having me, Joseph. And thanks to Carla for recommending me. We'll see everybody in the Zoom room.
I'm glad he said thank you to Carla as opposed to damn you, Carla. But yeah, that was amazing. And look, I just got a Ron Tite masterclass. Those were amazing best practices and tips, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say about disruption now. So I'll be back tomorrow, 2 p.m. Normal time. Take care of yourselves, and just continue to do good and be good, and pay it forward, and, you know, spread the good word. Anyway, take care, guys. Bye-bye.